We're gonna be talking about 5 or 6, maybe even 7 cheap upgrades that can actually dramatically improve your shooting abilities. During my first year of shooting handguns, I tested a very particular cheap upgrade that made me realize that maybe the majority of the advice that I had been given about upgrading was wrong. And you might be wondering to yourself, well, what do you mean the majority of the advice? The most repeated advice that I had heard from people at the gun range, from people online in YouTube, or people on forums was upgrading your handgun won't improve your shooting abilities because you can't buy skill. The second most repeated piece of advice that I got was upgrading your handgun will make it unreliable, therefore you shouldn't do it. Now, they are not 100% wrong, because if you don't upgrade your handgun correctly, or if you choose the wrong upgrades for you, then yes, it can actually hinder your shooting abilities and it can make your gun unreliable. But don't worry, I'm gonna show you step by step how to walk through this, how to identify the types of upgrades that you need instead of just some upgrades that you want. Now, I'm sure you're wondering at this point, like, what do you mean by cheap? Everything that we're gonna talk about in this video is gonna cost less than one Benjamin Franklin. Now, the next thing we need to define is, what do I mean by make you better? When it comes to handguns, I look for upgrades that will actually help me shoot faster, more accurately, and more consistently. I really look for upgrades that work synergistically with one another to make all 3 of those goals possible. I guess one of the secrets to that is making sure you choose upgrades that are actually beneficial for you in your biology and physiology. And we're gonna cover that in more detail here in a second. But the first upgrade that I really wanted to mention is one that there's no amount of skill, practice, or technique can fix it. And to really drive this point home, about a week or so ago, I was out testing some guns, and I noticed that had significantly more recoil than I anticipated for a 9mm. Well,
That's not good.
Oh, what did that sound like to you? That was just weird.
Yeah, it did not sound right. Barrel's clear?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it just sounded weird.
It did.
I wonder if maybe it was just a hot load or something.
Yeah, we'll see. That was weird.
Hope it doesn't blow up in your face.
Yeah, that would suck. Why does that ammo feel so heavy? Something just seemed off with the way that the gun was shooting. I looked at it and I had some really cheap ammo in it. And so I decided to swap out that cheap ammo and put some higher quality ammo in it. The difference in recoil was insane. I don't know what that last ammo was, so we're gonna try some Wilson Combat 9mm.
That is way
so much different. This brings me to another problem that sometimes can't be fixed with training or technique. If you look at this footage here, I think this footage is from the year 2015 or 2016. It was pre-YouTube. I had a stock Gen 4 Glock 19 at the time, and you'll notice that when I am shooting the gun, every time that I take a shot, I'm having to re-grip. And this is called milking the grip. Now, when I looked at this footage, that was bothering me, because something that I really wanted to be able to do at the time was to be able to do multiple shots on target in a quick manner. So double taps, triple taps, things like that. I could do double taps and triple taps. It was just only the first round would be on target and the other 2 wouldn't. Once I saw that footage, I came home and I looked up videos on how to properly grip a handgun. I had already done this previously, but I just wanted to make sure that there was nothing that I was missing out on. Now, this is one of those things where people say, okay, if you upgrade your handgun, it won't make you a better shooter. That is true if you don't have proper technique. So I do highly suggest you guys go check out some videos on how to properly grip handguns. There's one that I highly recommend that I'll put in the description of this video so you can watch it later. But given that you have the proper grip and technique, this upgrade will make you a better shooter. I have very sweaty, oily hands. So if a gun doesn't have the proper grip texture on it from the factory, when I go shooting, my hands start slipping. Now, there are other guys out there who don't suffer from this, and they can grab almost any handgun that their little heart desires, and they can shoot it just fine. But we got to think about this in terms of friction. So if you have a handgun that doesn't have enough texture, or doesn't have texture in the right places, there's no amount of force that you can apply to that grip to overcome no texture, because it's just a slick surface with no friction on it. So when it comes to addressing problems with the grip of the pistol, there are 3 problems that I typically run into. First one is milking the grip. So the best cheap way to fix grip milking is with something called grip tape. Currently, grip tape is made by 2 different companies. I'll have info over at this list so you can check them out. And they are available in usually 2 different styles. You usually have like the skateboard type, which most people that conceal carry don't use. Those are mostly for duty guns that are carried OWB because the grip tape will rub on you and rub holes in your clothes and make your skin raw. But then they have a rubberized type grip. You can actually see the footage here. After I put the grip tape on, I was actually able to shoot just fine without remilking my grip. Now, if you look closely at my support hand, and specifically my thumb, you'll notice that I had a secondary problem that the grip tape that I had at the time simply wouldn't fix. And that problem was thumb slip. So thumb slip is when your gun is recoiling and instead of your thumb tracking back with the frame, it slips like this. This can be caused from either improper grip, it can be a technique thing, but if your technique is correct, there are 2 places on your gun that need more friction. You need friction up in this area right here, and you need possibly ledge or some friction right up in here. So the cheapest way to fix that is with grip tape. So if you look at this M2.0 metal right here, you'll notice that this little spot has a little grip tape on it. When I bought this gun, there was no grip tape there. A company made some laser cut grip tape for it. I'll have more info at the parts list if you want to check it out. It was able to fill in those little spots that were slippery, and this actually helps my thumb stay in place. Now, grip tape is a phenomenal way to fix that problem, but it doesn't work on every single handgun. If you look at this Glock 43X right here, there's a little spot right here where you could technically put some grip tape, but that little spot is, for my hands, really far back and my thumb goes past it. And so on this gun, I actually use a weapon light to prevent thumb slip. And I simply just grab right here. And if I pull this wrist back, it will not slip because my thumb is riding on top of this weapon light, not back here where the actuator is. The downside to doing a light to prevent thumb slip is, number 1, it doesn't work on all firearms. For example, you have a full-size firearm with a light. It can help, but because the light is further back, you're just gonna hit the actuator, and it's not the cheapest option available, but on some guns, it is a viable option. Now, this next option is one that has been around for the P320s for a long time, but it just now came out for some other platforms. And that's gonna be something called a thumb ledge. This is my HKVP9. These guns tend to have a lot of recoil from the factory. This gun has something called a thumb ledge on it that you can see right there. So this is an aftermarket thumb ledge that you can get. I will have some more info over at the parts list if you want to check it out. But what makes these thumb rests the most unique of any other thumb rests that I've ever tried? In the past, they were only typically available for the P320. So if you didn't have a P320, you couldn't really get a thumb rest. Well, now they're available for not only the P320, but also the HKVP9. They're also available for Canic pistols as well as Glocks now. And I do believe they are available not only for Gen 5, but also Gens 1 through 4. Additionally, they're also available for the Glock 26, which I thought was kind of crazy. Now, these are extremely effective at mitigating recoil. In fact, when I did the testing on the VP9, this thing has a lot of extra recoil, like I mentioned, and this definitely helped me keep the front of that muzzle down under recoil. Same thing on the Glock, especially when I paired it with the compensator that's on here. We're not gonna talk about this comp in today's video because it's not less than $100. Now, these are great and they're actually affordable, but the downside to these is you probably have to pick up a special holster for them. Thankfully, there is a list of compatible holsters that I'll have a link to over at the parts list. That way, if you do wanna check them out, you at least will have a holster that fits it. Now, for the next problem that you might run into when it comes to your grip, and this doesn't happen on all guns, but it can happen on a lot of guns, and that's gonna be pinky slip. Case in point, if you look at the early Gen 5s that came out a few years ago, they had this stupid half moon cutout in the front. Notice that there's not much of a lip on this front strap, and so when they're under recoil, not only was that half moon cutout sharp and it hurt, but it would cause the gun to start slipping in your hand. The way a lot of people fixed that in the past was with something called a magwell. So magwells, I don't typically get them for doing reloads. I don't care about that. I get them for improving grip, where you get a shelf under here, and when you push up on this, it's not going anywhere. In fact, that's the other way that I fixed my Glock 43X without grip tape and without getting a stipple job on it, was simply with a magwell and that light. Now when I push this gun up, it does not slip at all. Sometimes, depending on what type of handgun you have, maybe there's not any mag wells available. Now, another way you can improve pinky slip, especially if you have a firearm that doesn't have compatible mag wells with it, is with grip tape. You can simply take some of that grip tape, take a sliver, and put it right here on this front strap, and that will greatly increase the friction so that your hand doesn't slip anymore. Another place where you will see pinky slip happen a lot is with your subcompact and your slim subcompact guns, such as guns similar to, say, the Glock 26, or guns that are similar to the Glock 43. It doesn't have to be these particular brands, but I'm just using these as examples. So with these guns, they have such short grips that your pinky doesn't even fit on there. So the first way that you can actually fix this is with a base plate. The first base plate that I like is one that has an extension on the bottom, just like so. If you notice with the Glock 26, for example, when I put it in, it sticks out like that. And what it does is it gives your pinky a place to rest on the bottom while preventing your ring finger from slipping on the grip. And I didn't think that these would work when I first tested them, but I was actually very impressed when I went to the range, started shooting this, and I was like, wow, this works really well. Now, those are great, but usually if you have a gun that has a short grip, you're gonna want increased capacity on your magazines. So for me, I like using extensions instead of the plate, which increase the length of the grip. Now, this is all going to depend on your scenario and if you can conceal something like this with this magazine in. So some people will carry with a flush plate like this, right? And then they will use one of these as a backup mag. But as you can see, when you're using extension, you can get all your fingers on there. Same thing on the Glock 43 right here, you can get all your fingers on there. So far, we've talked about 3 different types of problems that can occur with your grip. Regardless if you have the proper grip technique, some problems can still arise, right? So first, we talked about the gun slipping and you had to milk it. Then we talked about thumb slip like this. Then we talked about pinky slip or even ring finger slip, depending on the size of your gun. Now, those are 3 separate things that people can grab if they want to upgrade their gun. But if you have specific pistols, you can actually fix it all in one go a lot easier. And sometimes even cheaper than getting all 3 of those. And that's going to be to pick up a complete grip replacement. Traditionally, grip replacements were only for the P320, P365s and stuff like that. But recently, in the past few years, we've had a lot of them for other brands of firearms, especially Glock. For example, P80 makes 100% frames or 80, depending on what you want to get. But P80 did some things to their grip that made me like them far superior than, say, OEM Glock. They had really good grip texture on them. They also had thumb ledges for you built in. And because of that, I was able to shoot these dramatically better than OEM Glock. You can check out this footage here. This is not long after the previous footage you saw of me shooting an OEM Glock. And you can tell the slide is 100% OEM, all the internals are OEM. The only difference is it has a P80 grip. But the other problem was they didn't put any texturing on the thumb ledges. So you had to add either grip tape or get that stippled. The next one that is really good for Glock is the Palmetto State Armory dagger grips. These things are dirt cheap and they're actually phenomenally good. They're not blocky like your standard Glocks, but they do have that hump in the back and some people don't like that hump. Thankfully, there is another company that makes a grip that's just as cheap as PSA, and that's this guy right here. In fact, on this gun right here, if you take away the cost of this plastic magwell and this upgraded trigger, I built this entire thing for like 500 bucks, including the red dot and the sights and all that and the internals. I had a full video on it last year, but this frame comes from a company called SCT. They did everything right on this grip. And what's weird about this grip is when you first grip it, it's kind of blocky and it doesn't feel quite right. But as you shoot it, it melts into your hand almost. It's really strange. You're able to shoot this thing incredibly fast and incredibly flat and accurately, and it's less than 50 bucks usually. They did a really good job, not only with the checkering on the front strap, there's also a lip on the front that prevents pinky slip. There's enough texture on it to prevent thumb slip. Look at that place for your thumb right there. That is deep and textured. This is my all-time favorite Glock frame replacement. However, the problem with the SCT, PSA frame, and the P80 frame is these only work on Gen 3s. What if you have a Gen 4 or Gen 5? Well, the only viable option that I have found is these from Nomad. And these just came out for Gen 5, but they're also available for Gen 4. They can be had with or without a magwell. Obviously, if you get the magwell, it makes the price skyrocket. Now, these can be had for less than $100, depending on if they're on sale or not. Sometimes they're just a hair over. They have phenomenal texture and they have good thumb support. And these are really easy to shoot, fast, flat, and consistently. Now, a new gun that came out recently that you can actually get upgraded grips for is the Springfield Armory Prodigy. I just did a full review on this, going over every little detail about it, what I like about it, but this gun actually incorporates almost every single upgrade that we're gonna talk about in this video, and it all comes from the factory. So if you wanna check that video out, I'll put a little link right up here. But what's great about it is you can get separate grips for it in different sizes. Now, the aftermarket hasn't caught up yet, so right now they're only factory grips, but it's only a matter of time until the aftermarket catches up. And when that happens, I'll make sure to make some videos on it. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on those. Which brings me to the next upgrade or problem that people have, and that's gonna be manipulating the controls, also known as your slide lock, slide release, and your magazine release. Depending on your hand size, you might not be able to reach this magazine release in the firing grip. Some people, like me, prefer to be able to release that in the firing grip, because if you can't, you're forced to come back, change your grip, and then hit the button here. Some people also can't reach these slide stop slide releases. And so it really depends on how you train if you're gonna need this next upgrade or not, but you need to be very careful when you're upgrading these because they can cause you more problems than they solve. For example, I can't use extended magazine releases because when I'm shooting the gun under recoil, my support hand will bump that extended magazine release and then the mag drops out. The reason I can't use extended slide lock slide releases is because I ride my hand very high on this side and my hand will bump the slide lock slide release and it will lock open before the magazine is out of ammunition. Be careful with doing extended controls. Make sure you go to the range and you test these in just precarious positions, because every time I've tried an extended magazine release, I drop a mag. Every time I've tried an extended slide stop slide release, I get premature lock open. But they are cheap and they're easy to upgrade for most different types of brands of handguns. Now, this next upgrade might be a little bit controversial because it depends on what state you live in, and that's gonna be the trigger. Now, traditionally speaking, 5 years ago, Glock and M&P came with the worst triggers for a striker fired gun that was popular. But in recent years, when the Gen 5s came out, Glock did make their triggers a lot smoother and a little bit lighter. Most of my Gen 5s come in at about 4.5 pounds. And then recently, M&P has upgraded their triggers to the point where you don't even need an upgraded trigger unless you absolutely want one. These come from the factory and they're really good. They're so much better than their old triggers. But every now and again, you'll still get a gun where the trigger is just too rough or too heavy, or it's just heavier than it should be compared to other guns of the same model. And in that case, you might want to upgrade your trigger. The two triggers that I recommend the most to everyone is Apex Tactical and Overwatch Precision. The reason those are my go-to triggers is because, number one, they cover a gambit of different brands of handguns. Between the two, you can get your M&P 2.0s, Smith & Wesson SDVEs, the CZ P10 series. Some of them have CZ Shadow 2 triggers, Ruger Mark IV triggers. They got P320s covered. They got Walther PDPs covered. And between those two companies, they cover all of them. But that's not the most important reason. The reason that I recommend them is they're the only two aftermarket trigger companies that I'm aware of. There are some police departments that allow their cops to use them because both of those companies drop test the crap out of their triggers to make sure they're safe. But I highly recommend them because they will dramatically improve how smooth the trigger is, and they will lighten it just a little bit depending on which version that you go with. Now, this next problem is really going to depend on you and your biology, because you can't shoot things you can't see. And I'm not talking about lights, I'm talking about your vision. Sometimes guns come with crappy sights. Like we all know, Glock comes with probably the worst sights in the world. They're made of plastic and they don't really align properly. So a lot of people like to take these off when they buy a Glock and put on some metal sights that align properly. The cheapest way to upgrade this is with some PSA sights. These sights are made of metal. They're a 3-dot sight. They're not anything special, but you know what's great about these sights? They cost less than 20 bucks. But obviously those are only gonna fit Glocks or other handguns that use Glock sights. Like the Walther PDP, for example, uses Glock sights. So you could install them onto those as well. But my other favorite type of sights, and this is only gonna work for guns that accept Glock sights, we'll get into some other ones here in a second, but that's gonna be these from Shadow Systems. I really prefer a bright green front sight and a blacked out rear with a square notch. These just work best for my eyes. I'm not gonna tell you that they're the best because your eyes might be different. But the downside to those Shadow System sights is they might be around 100 bucks. They might be a little bit more expensive. The other downside is they only work for guns that accept Glock sights. But if I have a gun that doesn't accept Glock sights, my next go-to is Night Vision. I've been using these guys since early 2018, and they've been by far some of my favorites, not just because of the style of them, but because they make them for so many different applications. And they're cheaper than Trijicon. And so, for example, on this MMP 2.0, I had to get some suppressor height sights for it. And you can see there, I got a blacked out rear, and then I got a bright green front sight. Obviously, your eyes may be different. I don't like anything on the rear because it distracts me and I can't focus on the front sight or on the target. And then I like something that really picks up my eyes and draws my eyes out there. So this is gonna be something that's kind of up in the air, but sights are definitely the next thing that I'd upgrade. I'll have links for the ones that I recommend the most over at the parts list. Now let's get into the bonus upgrade. Now this is an upgrade that's not necessary because so far in this video, we've talked about upgrades that fix a problem between the handgun and your physiology, whether it be the sights, the way you grip the gun, maybe your trigger's kind of messed up, or maybe your finger doesn't reach the trigger, so you get a shortened reach trigger. This one, I'm not gonna say to carry it or not carry it, but that's gonna be ways to reduce recoil or felt recoil, or getting your sights back on target quicker. That's gonna be with the use of compensators. Now, there's a lot of good compensators out there. Personally, I like Arc Division. I like the ones that come from Harrington Arms. I like the ones that come from Agency Arms. There's a lot of good ones. The problem when it comes to compensators is compensators have to pass a certain test for me in order for me to ever consider carrying with it. The first test they have to pass is they have to be able to cycle 115 grain range ammo with the OEM recoil spring. The reason that that's important to me, obviously when I'm carrying my gun, I'm using higher powered ammo, but I wanna make sure that if there happened to be a light load in that carry ammo, that it would still cycle. The downside to being able to cycle on an OEM guide rod spring is gonna be, it doesn't compensate as good, which means it just doesn't shoot as flat, but it definitely shoots flatter than if you didn't have one. So what I look for when it comes to a compensator that I'm potentially going to carry is I typically want a single port compensator. They usually can be found in dual port, single port. The single ports tend to be more reliable for a carry gun than the dual ports, and usually you don't have to mess with the springs. When it comes to messing with springs, especially with Glock, there's only one type of spring that I recommend because every other spring has given me problems. Real quick, I just want to show you why I am super averse to using any types of lightened guide rod springs on my carry guns and why there's only one specific brand that I do choose. So this is a Palmetto State Armory Dagger. It's essentially a Gen 3 Glock. And on here I have a 22 TCM barrel that comes with a lightened guide rod spring. I only put it in there so I could show you what the effects of a lightened guide rod spring do. I want you to pay attention to the back of the slide or the front of the slide, either one, whenever I start pressing this trigger. See how it moves? And then it goes forward. That is super easily pressed out of battery. The other problem with this is when it's cycling, sometimes if it doesn't come back hard enough, it won't go back into battery. Now let me show you. Nothing happens. Whenever I've had to lighten the guide rod spring, specifically on Glocks in the past, that's always been my experience, is that it tends to be unreliable. It wants to come out of battery really quickly, but that has recently changed with this little fellow right here. Reason I like this, number one, is most guide rods that you get that allow you to take the spring off and put another spring on are very difficult. They just have like a screw cap and you have to Loctite that screw. The problem is if you ever have to change the spring again, it's really hard to unscrew it because you had to Loctite it. And if you don't Loctite it, that screw will back out while you're shooting. It's just a crappy situation all around. But this is called I think this is called the compressor from Radian. And this one's very simple. The other reason that I prefer this guide rod and spring system is it works with Gen 3s, but it also comes with the adapter to work with Gen 4 and Gen 5s. But the other reason why I like it is it comes with 3 different springs. One's a factory weight and one's a little bit lighter, and then there's another one that's even lighter. And I don't get any of that wobble on the slide when I'm pressing the trigger unless I'm on the lightest of the light springs. And which means I can run the middle weight spring and I don't have any problems, and it's just an ease of use. And these things are not that expensive, especially compared to when you buy just like a tungsten or a stainless steel guide rod. Now, the other problem with compensators is obviously you're going to need a threaded barrel, and threaded barrels aren't cheap unless you own a Glock. Whereas you can just go pick one up for like 99 bucks. Less than $100. You can go pick up a compensator for less than 100 bucks, and then voila. And then you can go pick up the compressor spring. Obviously, when they all add up, they're more than 100 bucks, but you get the idea. Now, the most important thing though is that you test this. You test this with good ammo. You test this with range ammo. You want to test this in variable conditions outside, whether maybe a little bit of rain, maybe it's sunny, maybe it's hot, maybe it's cold, because compensators are going to act differently based on conditions. I'm not telling you to go out and get a compensator to carry. I'm just saying if you do choose to carry one, you need to make sure that that thing runs very, very consistently. I'll have some links to ones that I recommend over at the parts list, but that doesn't mean it's going to run perfectly. The only ones that I found that run perfectly are unfortunately a lot more than $100. Which brings me to my next point. Not all upgrades that are actually worth it are going to be cheap. Sometimes you have to pay to play to get good upgrades. And if you want to know more about those upgrades, go check out this video right here. But if you have any questions, let me know down in the comments. But until next time, I love you, and you guys stay sexy.